Welcome to our compilation of Epic Naval Battles. It's the 2nd of December 1939 on a British cargo liner off the west coast of South Africa.
Have you heard about the German?
Yeah.
They sunk another ship south of us last week.
What? We're under attack!
Tell the captain!
What the hell was that?
At the bridge, Captain William Stubbs is already on full alert. His binoculars reveal a terrifying sight. Stalking them is a 16,000-ton German monster, a heavy cruiser-sized ship armed with battleship-sized 11-inch guns. A pocket battleship.
Full power!
Aye, aye, sir.
Send the distress signal.
The small ship turns to flee, transmitting all the information they can in the last minutes they have left. A light shines from the enemy, blinking in Morse code.
They're ordering us to cease transmission.
To hell with that. Keep transmitting. Make sure every ship in the region knows they're here.
Aye, aye, sir.
Captain Stubbs keeps watching the enemy growing on the horizon. The ship's massive 280mm guns are aiming straight towards him. He recognizes that profile. It's the Admiral Graf Spee.
It's the Spee. Put that in the transmission. Pocket battleship Graf Spee.
Yes, sir.
They keep sending all the information they can, dragging on the encounter until the fearsome warship is right on top of them. Continued resistance would be dangerous. Stubbs has no option but to surrender.
Cut power and stop transmitting. It's over.
The Doric Star falls quiet. Aboard the German warship, Captain Hans Wilhelm Langsdorff watches as his men board the small cargo ship. They take the crew captive and bring them aboard the heavy cruiser before proceeding to ransack the ship and set up scuttling charges. It's a practice procedure at this point, one that Langsdorff is all too happy to see completed with professionalism.
Gut gemacht.
Back on the upper deck, Captain Stubbs is singled out and taken to the brig. Behind him, massive explosions wash across the waves, followed by cheers from the German sailors. But while the cargo hauler sinks into the abyss, thousands of miles away, a Royal Navy squadron hears its dying transmissions.
Sir, Graf Spee got another one.
Commodore Henry Hardwood thinks over the new information.
Bring the officers.
Under his command are heavy cruiser Exeter and light cruisers Ajax and Achilles. They're patrolling off the coast of South America, as far away from the scene of battle as they could be. The Graf Spee has been their target for months, but with this transmission, Harwood gets the feeling they can finally bring its rampage to an end.
There's a change of plan. The Graf Spee claimed another victim at approximately 13 hours yesterday. I suspect South American traffic will be their next target. We need to be ready.
I agree, sir. But where?
I get the feeling they'll be moving to
Die Mündung des Rio de la Plata.
the River Plate,
Dort ist sehr viel Verkehr.
the choke point for all cargo ships headed for the Argentine and Uruguayan capitals.
Dort gibt es einige Ziele.
The 16,000-ton Graf Spee turns for its new destination, unaware that they're falling directly into Harwood's grasp. On the morning of the 15th of December, 13 days after the loss of the Doric Star, on board the heavy cruiser Exeter, Captain Frederick Secker-Bell supervises the early morning activity. The squadron has been patrolling the estuary for days. Lookouts are on full alert, waiting for Harwood's prediction to come reality. It's been a tough wait. Initial sightings suggest they're coming, but they haven't heard anything new for days. Until...
Sir, Harwood reports smoke at 3:20. Orders to investigate.
Ply affirmative. Men to action stations. Load SAPs.
Yes, sir. Exeter breaks west, approaching the mysterious ship. Slowly, the masts come into view. Then, the superstructure. And finally, the mighty guns. It's clear. The Germans are here.
It's them! Tell Harwood we have a pocket battleship.
Message confirmed. A pocket battleship at 3:20.
The Exeter reports the enemy in sight.
After months of chase and so many lost merchant ships, the showdown is finally here.
Men to action stations, heading 30 degrees and full power. Tell Exeter to charge the ship from the south. We surround them from the east as practiced.
Order from Ajax to Exeter. Charge the ship from the south. The rest of the force will execute the other flank. Permission to fire.
But that fires shells over twice as heavy as their own, the Exeter is completely outclassed. But Bell trusts their strategic and numerical advantage.
Flank speed. Keep the current heading.
Yes, sir.
Herr Kapitän, der Rauch am Horizont.
It's a surprise, but he accepts the challenge.
Nun gut, lasst sie uns treffen.
The two ships keep approaching, the Graf Spee's path unchanged. Bal watches through the binoculars as two giant turrets traverse towards them. And then,
Feuererlaubnis.
the first shots of the Battle of River Plate wash across the waves. The shells striking the sea. Exeter Gunnery Officer Lieutenant Commander Richard Jennings remembers,
The captain hailed me, not with the usual rigmarole of enemy in sight, bearing, etc., but with, there's f***ing sheer.
King Shear! Open fire at her!
the Exeter unleashes her guns with powerful blasts. The shells fly across the sky, and they too fall short. Upon Exeter, things are getting frantic as the German warship finds its aim. Shells splash closer and closer, littering the deck with deadly shrapnel. But the Exeter too adjusts their range. They fire their 8-inch batteries, striking the Graf Spee on the hull, but failing to pierce its armour. Deep within the German warship, Captain Stubbs of the Doric Star sits locked in a cell, alone and in silence. The shell strikes reverberating on the hull fill his ears. In return, the German salvo strikes just barely short. The massive shells detonate just a few yards away with awe-inspiring power. The shock and shrapnel so powerful, it takes out Exeter's radio.
Sir, we lost contact with Harwood.
It's too late to turn back now. Press on!
Their shells impact the Graf Spee's deck, wrecking anti-aircraft guns, but they're doing nothing to slow the enemy Goliath. Bal watches the enemy with his binoculars. He sees the massive guns fire, launching their shells into the air. They linger for what seems like eternal seconds. Bal doesn't have time to react. Not that it would have done anything, but he can feel it. That is a hit. The brutal impact takes out the turret, and the shrapnel flies towards the bridge. The fragments punch effortlessly through the bridge's thin walls, to tragic results. Bal finds himself on the floor, dazed and surrounded by the fallen. Somehow, through sheer luck, he's largely unhurt. There's no time to mourn. With determination burning in his eyes, Bal returns to his post, but finds his communications destroyed.
Bloody hell!
At that moment, medical personnel rush in, but there's no time. He hurries past them, abandoning the bridge and making his way towards the aft conning station.
Do you have comms here?
No, sir. We've lost them.
He looks around and calls for the first sailor he sees.
You, come over! Have no comms! Tell the port torpedoes to prepare to launch when the enemy comes into view. And the men at the rudder to steer 25 degrees
The unknown
starboard.
sailor salutes and runs off. He rushes for someone else. On his way back to the bridge, Bal continues to recruit more sailors, re-establishing communications with the entire ship.
You, ask the damage control officer for updates. You, tell the magazines I have no comms. Any emergency they need, send me a runner and find someone to tell the same thing to
Yes,
the
sir.
aft turret.
In a matter of minutes, a team of messengers forms. From this point on, they become Captain Bal's only way to control the ship. But somehow, it works. The ship begins turning starboard, and the torpedoes are ready to fire. and they launch off into the sea. The 4 remaining guns fire with deafening fury above the waves, while the torpedoes silently approach their target. Despite the messenger's best efforts, though, they could never be quick enough for precise aim, and the torpedoes completely miss. But Bal refuses to stand down.
Keep firing!
The remaining 2 turrets continue to fire, spreading death and destruction across the Graf Spee's exposed elements, but doing little internally. Shell after shell strikes the German warship's heavy armor with little effect, ricocheting away or stopping dead in its tracks. Finally, they strike luck. At last, a round pierces the armor and punches straight through the lower decks and detonates deep within, destroying the fuel purification plant. There are no fires or floods, but in a single blow, the ship has been doomed. Unable to purify its vast stores of diesel, it has cut its usable fuel from days to hours, not enough to return to Europe. But it does nothing to hamper their combat strength. Another salvo falls on the battered heavy cruiser, one shell slamming into the A turret and another punching through the hull. The second shell explodes within and sets fire to an ammunition storage rack. The brave sailors in the station rush for their extinguishers, quelling the flames before a catastrophic fire and explosion could be unleashed. The strike silences gunnery officer Richard Jennings' last turret. He decides to abandon his position as director of the control tower and run through the chaos, reaching the Exeter's last working main gun. To the turret crew's astonishment, Jennings climbs to the top of the turret and starts shouting directions.
Travel left! Aim for their turrets!
Jennings stares down the massive enemy warship in the distance as his turret takes aim underneath him.
Fire!
Jennings is blasted with gas and heat from the giant guns, but he takes it.
Correct high! 100! Fire!
Meanwhile, in the 2 light cruisers, Commodore Harwood is becoming impatient with the lack of results. All this time, they were executing the other flank, seeking to overwhelm the Graf Spee with the crossfire. But without communication with Exeter, they can't even find out if their aim is true. And now, he clearly sees that the Exeter is smoking, enlisting, while the Graf Spee stands seemingly unharmed. With a sinking feeling, the truth dawns on him. They've been doing nothing.
Heading 285, close the distance, proceed at utmost speed.
The ships break formation and charge to Exeter's rescue. Aboard the Graf Spee, Langsdorff spots the incoming British.
Das ist ein Torpedoangriff. Soll Kurs West. Stellt die Nebelwand auf.
But Exeter isn't done yet,
Heading 270!
and their last turret is being commanded by what seems like a madman riding atop. But still, they chase after the Graf Spee, firing with what little they have and scoring hits across the superstructure. The Graf Spee turns all its guns towards them and they open fire. The massive volley falls short by the smallest of margins, creating a huge splash just in front of Jennings' face. But he's unfazed.
You've got the range!
He calls for more, but the gun doesn't move.
What's going on?
We've lost power. It can't traverse.
The water has filtered through the damaged hull and short-circuited the turret systems.
Bloody hell! We've lost the Y turret. Tell the captain.
Sir, white turret has malfunctioned.
Captain Bal is furious, with fire in his eyes.
I'm going to ram the bastard. It'll be the end of us, but it will sink him too.
Order to ram it.
Turn starboard.
Starboard!
The Exeter, in flames and out of options, turns to ram the enemy. But then, a salvo of shells brackets the Graf Spee. The light cruisers Ajax and Achilles have gotten past the smokescreen and have opened fire with vastly improved accuracy.
Harwood is on them. They finally got him.
Verdammt, sie haben die Reichweite gefunden.
Captain Langsdorff pushes the Exeter to the back of his mine as the new Challengers pummel the Graf Spee's upper deck with salvo after salvo. With damage and casualties mounting, Captain Langsdorff orders a retreat.
Feuer einstellen. Volle Kraft voraus. Nehmt Kurs auf Montevideo.
The Ajax and Achilles pummel the ship for another hour as the Graf Spee desperately sails for neutral waters. But they're too far away, and Harwood is determined to not let the ship slip away.
What is our ammunition status?
20% remaining,
Harwood is
sir.
shocked. It's far less than he expected. If he carries on, he could have too little to defend himself if they happen to face another battle.
Hold fire. Pull back and shadow them.
They pursue the Graf Spee all the way to the neutral port of Montevideo, Uruguay. There, the prisoners of the Doric Star are released per international regulations. But back with the Graf Spee, their problems were far from over. Upon their docking in Montevideo, deceit and politics soon follow. The British begin broadcasting easy-to-intercept signals suggesting that reinforcements are arriving. They've no fuel reserves to return home, no ability to fix the fuel plant, and strict orders not to let the ship become interned in Uruguay. There's only one apparent option, and that's to flee Argentina, but he believes a reinforced British fleet will stand in his way.
Ich glaube nicht, dass wir eine andere Wahl haben. Macht die Sprengsätze scharf.
On the 17th of December, the ship, with only Langsdorff and 40 other men aboard, moved out of the Uruguayan waters. It was a devastating blow to Langsdorff. High Command blamed him completely for Admiral Graf Spee's end. Langsdorff wrote, "I alone bear the responsibility for scuttling the Panzerschiff Admiral Graf Spee. I am happy to pay with my life for any possible reflection on the honor of the flag." 3 days later, in a hotel room in Buenos Aires, he took his gun and kept his word. The mighty ship burned in the shallow water for the next 2 days. Despite the lack of decisive victory, the battle was still considered a great success for the Royal Navy. Commodore Henry Harwood was promoted to Rear Admiral and knighted for his leadership. Captain Frederick Secker-Bell wouldn't receive any Navy awards for his actions, but he and a good portion of Exeter's crew did get a hero's welcome from the residents of the city of Exeter. Gunnery Officer Richard Jennings, on the other hand, would be awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for his actions and went on to command ships of his own. It's the 5th of March 1944, and in a cramped U-boat, Captain Gerhard Seehausen is hunting his prey.
Feuer!
The cargo ship erupts in a ball of flame. It's a hit. This is the 4th ship they've sunk on this sortie. The submarine is the U-66, one of the most successful U-boats of the war. It has taken part in 4 wolf packs, claiming 36 victims and sending over 200,000 tons worth of ships and cargo to the bottom of the sea. The Germans, buoyed by their success, plan their next hunting ground.
Ich denke, wir sollten hier jagen.
Hundreds of miles away, on the US destroyer escort, the USS Buckley, Lieutenant Commander Brent Abel receives a transmission.
Sir, orders from Block Island. U-boat attack reported at 03.56 north, 07.36 east. Task group is ordered to sweep the area.
Reply, we copy. Engines full steam ahead. Maintain heading 150.
Abel and his ship forms part of a U-boat hunting party, and they've been given a target. After months at sea, the German supplies are getting low, and they surface at an agreed rendezvous point west of Africa. Captain Seehausen waits impatiently at the conning tower.
Immer noch nichts?
Nichts aus dem Ausguck, Sir.
Sie sind zu spät.
U-66 now finds itself alone, low on fuel and torpedoes, and on the run from the skies and the seas, which are swarming with American patrols. They sail in circles waiting for an arranged resupply, but it's nowhere to be seen. As the lookout fruitlessly scans the horizon one more time, something unexpected reaches his ears. Looking up, he spots the last thing they want to see.
Achtung, Jabos! Männer auf
Gefechtsstation! Fertig machen zum Angriff!
Up in the distance, inside an American TBM-1C bomber, Lieutenant Jimmy J. Sellers scans the waters. A dark outline sits in the waves. It's completely unrecognizable, but Sellers knows the region. That's no island.
That's a submarine.
Nicht schießen! Vielleicht hat er uns nicht gesehen.
Es hat uns gesehen!
Halt! Es gibt keinen Angriff. Warten Sie ab!
Sollen wir untertauchen? Vielleicht hat er uns entdeckt.
Seehausen is torn. Caution would indicate them to submerge and escape, but they don't have many days of diesel left, and their diving equipment needs spare parts. If they miss this resupply, there's no guarantee they can make it home.
Wir müssen an der Oberfläche bleiben und nach dem Versorgungsschiff Ausschau halten. Das ist kritisch.
In the sky, Sellers flies away, broadcasting every detail of the submarine. The message is received on the USS Buckley just 20 miles away.
They found it. Scout describes it sailing in circles, perhaps waiting for that other sub our boys sank the other day.
Commander Brent Abel grins at the news.
Prepare for battle. Engines to flank speed. Heading 350. Let's make all haste.
Just 40 minutes later, the USS Buckley approaches its target, guided along by Sellers in the sky.
Anything on the radar?
Negative, sir.
They should be here somewhere.
Detection bearing 335, 14,000 yards.
Abel scours the waves, but sees nothing but darkness. If he can't find it, how will his gunners hit the damn thing? He lowers his binoculars and looks west. The moon is big and low over the horizon, casting a long and beautiful reflection across the waves. He gets an idea.
Heading 340. Let's put that sub to our west.
On the German U-boat, lookouts finally notice the ship in the distance.
Schiff südwärts!
Welcher Art?
Unbekannt. Zu dunkel.
Sollen wir sie grüßen?
Negativ. Wir sind nicht in der Lage zu kämpfen, wenn es Amerikaner sind. Volle Alarmbereitschaft und Tarnung aufrechthalten. Funkstille. Nur passives Sonar.
The two vessels continue to get closer. Abel watches the sea throughout, finally managing to barely spot the shape of the submarine in the waves. But still, he holds fire. Meanwhile, aboard the U-66, they watch the unknown ship getting ever closer.
Die müssen uns schon gesehen haben. Abfeuern von Aufklärungsraketen.
Keine Antwort, Sir.
Chills travel down the spine of everyone gathered. It's clear now, they're not friendly.
Kurs auf 010. Hecktorpedos bereit.
Ja, Sir.
Können wir untertauchen?
Mit unseren klebrigen Ventilen würde das 15 Minuten dauern.
Dann vergessen Sie's. Lassen Sie die Männer bei den Waffen.
It's a disaster, but they're determined to fight. Alarms blare within the U-boat. Deep within the vessel, 21-inch torpedoes are locked and loaded.
Feuer!
Back at USS Buckley, Commander Abel finally sees his elusive prey enter the moon's reflection. The invisible ghost is now clear as day.
Heading 260. Get the range.
Yes, sir.
The helmsman turns hard to port, aiming the destroyer straight towards the enemy. But little does anyone on the bridge know that outside, a torpedo sails right by where the ship would have been if it hadn't changed course.
Torpedo verfehlt.
Feuer aus allen Rohren!
Muzzle flashes shine from the enemy submarine. Tracers fly towards the American ship. Without skipping a beat, Commander Abel gives the order
Open fire!
to unleash their own guns. 20mm, 40mm, and 3-inch guns open fire simultaneously, launching a storm of lead at the Germans. With the moon and preparation on their side, their accuracy is on point. The rounds slam straight onto U-66's deck. Seehausen's post is rocked by heavy fire, but the armor holds.
Wir sind getroffen!
Geben Sie mir einen Schadensbericht und schießen Sie weiter!
In the air, Salah's radios updates of the battle to the battle group.
Buckley has opened fire! Sub is returning fire! Boy, I have never before seen such concentration! Buckley is cutting hell out of the conning tower!
The German gunners brave the incoming shells, holding position and fighting back with all they have. But in the dark and the chaos, they aim far too high, their courage reaping no rewards. One by one, they fall, and the guns lay quiet. Looking on with his binoculars, Commander Abel sees the submarine about to leave the moon's reflection.
Check fire! Check fire! Don't waste ammunition while we can't see. Heading 180.
The shelling pauses at a good time for U-66. Injured men retreat into the hatches and are replaced by fresh crew. This is their chance.
Feuer!
AA guns open up on the destroyer escort, and shells streak across the sky. The U-boat gunners try to adjust low, but estimating the range of a dark object on a dark background proves next to impossible. The American storm of fire resumes, in full force, the whole broadside of the destroyer unleashing its many guns upon the submarine. The U-boat gun crews bravely continue to fire, despite completely lacking protection, loading and firing as bullets crash all around them. The chaos becomes background noise as they work. One of their rounds punches through the Buckley smokestack. But Buckley's weapons pummel the enemy into submission, the forecastle getting shredded. All throughout, Seehausen desperately calls evasive maneuvers. The sub constantly turns left and right, trying to dodge the brutal enemy fire. But in the process, they only slip further into Buckley's grasp. In U-66's conning tower, Captain Seehausen orders to turn around to face the enemy.
Kurs 210. Letzten Torpedo abfeuern.
The torpedo launches out the tube, carrying with it the German crew's last hope. Commander Abel watches the submarine maneuver, unsure of his enemy's plan. He shadows his every turn as his men continue to fire with exceptional marksmanship, scoring hit after hit. Then his sonar officer calls.
Torpedo, starboard bow!
Rudder full starboard!
USS Buckley turns hard to the right, the crew on deck watching the ominous trail of bubbles coming closer. At warship speeds, the maneuver feels eternal, but they manage to escape, the torpedo sailing harmlessly by.
Torpedo verfehlt.
It's devastating news. Their last chance is gone. Defenseless, Seehausen sees no option but to make the dreaded order.
Runter vom Schiff.
Ja, Sir.
Kurs 030. Feindlichem Feuer ausweichen, solange es geht.
A couple of German sailors rush out of the hatches and dive into the sea, escaping the barrage of shells. But in the dark, Abel doesn't notice and they continue mercilessly shelling the submarine. The USS Buckley maneuvers to sail alongside the enemy as their gunners bracket it with endless gunfire. The sub's guns have long gone quiet, but it still sails, and as far as Abel knows, it's still trying to fight with torpedoes. But he's to have none of it. Helmsman yanks on the wheel, turning the American destroyer right towards the U-boat. On board the U-boat, the escaping crew is shocked to see 1,400 tons of ship barreling towards them.
Ausweichmanöver! Alles nach Steuerbord!
But it's too late. The destroyer slams into the submarine and leaning against it. Soon after, Germans emerge out of the hatches, originally intending to abandon ship as ordered. They're shocked to find Buckley on their submarine. Without orders or plan, over a dozen Germans take out their personal weapons and decide to fire upon the Buckley's crew. Abel immediately realizes the risk they put themselves into and issues an order not heard in over a century.
Stand by to repel boarders!
Moments later, Germans start making the jump onto Buckley's deck. The Americans immediately respond with their own sidearms, opening fire on the mass of climbing Germans. Over a dozen Germans make it over the railing, and a fistfight breaks out on deck. Everything from spent casings to the officers' hot coffee become weapons, striking enemy sailors in the head and causing them to fall back. It's chaos. Aware of the devolving situation, Commander Abel does the only thing he can. USS Buckley starts sliding backwards across the submarine's hull, making an infernal noise. Germans cling onto the side of Buckley and are forced to choose between dropping back onto the U-66 or being abandoned aboard the enemy ship. An unknown sailor brings grenades and throws them at the sub.
Mein Gott.
Moments later, a huge explosion rises from the sea, and everything falls silent. USS Buckley circled the area for hours and picked up 36 survivors from the U-boat's 62-man crew, most of them having come out during the fight. USS Buckley itself didn't lose a single man, and Commander Abel would be awarded the Navy Cross for his leadership. He survived the war. Captain Gerhard Seehausen was never found and went down with his ship. He was just 26 years old. It's the afternoon of June the 24th, 1944, and Flight Lieutenant David Pop Hornell pilots his Catalina flying boat. He's on an anti-submarine patrol over the rough Norwegian seas when over the intercom, the port gunner asks,
"Hey, you seeing what I see on the port side?"
He checks to his left, and sure enough, in the distance, there's the distinct form of a U-boat floating in the sea.
I sure do.
Hornell activates the action station's alarm, and the flying boat turns towards the enemy with 4 depth charges at the ready. Below, spotters in the German U-boat 1225 see the incoming aircraft and sound the alarm. Oberleutnant zur See Ernst Sauerberg doesn't waste a second. The submarine turns in evasive maneuvers as twin 20mm cannons and a single 37mm flak cannon are turned towards the Catalina. The Catalina is rocked by 37mm flak. The plane's already shuddering under hits on the fuselage.
Cole, radio the base. Keep them updated. Copy that.
Hornell orders the radio operator, Sidney Cole, to tell the base their location and situation. But before Cole has a chance to send the first message, a flak shell punctures the radio compartment. Cole groans and puts pressure on his wound, but doesn't report it. Instead, he pushes through the pain and keys the transmission. Little does he know that the radio equipment has been damaged by the German fire. Hornell dives towards the target, unaware that none of their transmissions are being sent. As they get closer, 20mm cannons join the fray, and tracers zip all around. The impacts get ever more frequent, punching holes in the aircraft's thin skin.
Hold on.
The crew feel a violent shake and are horrified to see pieces of the right wing being torn off. Flak bursts by the right engine, and it starts shaking violently. Hornell fights with the aircraft as it starts to drift off course, the mounting damage making it ever harder to steer. At the nose of the aircraft, the front gunner opens fire at the U-boat with his twin 303 Brownings. Bullets rain around Sauerberg. The Catalina's fire zeroes in on the conning tower as they get closer. Sauerberg's men are struck, and the guns go silent.
Ihr Männer, an die Geschütze oder wir sind alle tot!
But the incoming fire is too accurate. The Germans can't move as the Catalina's machine guns rip into the conning tower. But then, one of the Catalina's guns jams. The U-boat commander, hearing the strike slow, seizes the opportunity. The crew jump into position and they open fire on the incoming Catalina. Hornell's blood runs cold as he sees once more a wall of tracers coming up at them. The Catalina's hit again with German fire ripping through the wings and fuselage. A glow comes from above, and Hornell looks up to see the damaged engine with flames gushing out of its cowling.
Starboard engine on fire. Shutting it down.
The second pilot shuts off the engine, but it doesn't stop the fuel leak. The ball of fire grows as a plane barrels towards the enemy submarine. Sauerberg is staring at a rapidly approaching ball of fire and orders evasive maneuvers. Above, Hornell is fully committed. Seeing the submarine turn left, he makes an adjustment at the last possible moment. And then he releases the depth charges. Below, Sauerberg watches the Catalina roar overhead as it drops its payload.
Gott im Himmel.
The depth charges splash perfectly around the submarine.
It's ahead! It's ahead!
The aircraft shakes even more violently. Hornell looks up at the flaming engine spinning in the wind. He sees it shake its own mounts apart. The rivets and bolts come undone. The fuel and parts of the engine rip away from the wing. Hornell knows they're not going to make it home.
We're going down! Brace yourselves, man!
The men all hold on, except Cole, who frantically signals SOS messages as Hornell prepares to land. The sea below is rough, but they've no other choice. Hornell turns his Catalina into the wind and prepares for landing. The floats lower, and the remaining engine is brought to idle. The waves only appear to get bigger as the plane gets closer to the surface.
Brace for impact!
Cole keeps keying SOS until the last possible moment, when he stops and braces for impact. The Catalina hits the first wave, but there's a strong headwind. The force bounces the airplane and it surges 150 feet back up into the air. Hornell wrestles with the controls, and in a split second, he aligns the Catalina for a second impact. They slam into the next wave, and the plane once again launches, reaching 50 feet before plunging back down towards the water. The still burning Catalina bursts through multiple waves before finally coming to a rest.
Get out!
Hornell urges on his men as he knows the Catalina can explode at any second. Flight engineer Donald Scott inflates a dinghy out of the left blister, while fellow engineer Fernand Laurent inflates one from the right.
You all get on board! I'll push it!
Hornell and some of the men jump into the freezing cold water to push the dinghy away. Cole bundles onto the dinghy and makes sure to secure the survival rations as the men start pushing. But then, he remembers the radio.
Wait, the radio!
Hornell barely has time to understand what Cole has just said before Cole starts swimming back towards the Catalina.
What are you doing? We need the radio. They won't find us. Don't. It's too late.
Hornell is right. The men watch painfully as the Catalina is engulfed in flames and sinks under the waves. They begin helping one another onto the dinghy. The inside of the dinghy is already beginning to flood as the men try to board. Hornell uses a helmet to throw water overboard, but then there's a cry.
We're missing someone.
Hornell's filled with dread and immediately gets to the edge and counts the heads. There's only 7. There's meant to be 8.
It's Laurent!
Fighting down panic, Hornell scours the rolling waves for his missing man. They see nothing as the dinghy rises and falls in the heavy waves. They catch a glimpse of a second dinghy that's also cresting a wave in the distance.
There he is!
And they push furiously through the swell, rushing to catch up with their friend. The men on the dinghy direct as they see their friend also paddling towards them. But then they crest another wave and see Laurent's dinghy empty.
Go faster!
They redouble their efforts and reach Laurent, who's managed to struggle back onto his dinghy. The relief of having 2 dinghies is palpable, and 2 of the crew move to get onto Laurent's dinghy. But then, Laurent's dinghy explodes and drops the men into the ice-cold sea water. They all start to pile onto the remaining dinghy, but they can't fit. Hornell volunteers to stay in the freezing water with 2 more men.
Hang on. We sent those distress calls. Rescue will be here soon.
But he doesn't know that none of them were sent. For 3 hours, Hornell organizes a rotation, swapping who waits in the water. Hoping to delay hypothermia, Hornell assigns himself to stay in the freezing water the longest. But it's unbearable. His strength is fading.
We have to figure out how to get everyone aboard.
Look, there!
An aircraft is spotted in the sky. It's another Catalina.
Get the flare gun!
The flare fires off into the sky, lingering in the air for a minute before falling into the sea. But the Catalina keeps on its path.
Another!
They send out a second flare, and yet again, the aircraft doesn't react.
Come on! Come on! Another!
A third flare is shot into the air. Seconds drag on. And finally,
they saw us.
The Catalina turns towards them.
We have survivors adrift, 63 degrees north, 0 degrees, 30 minutes west. Unable to land due to bad weather. We need a boat.
Over 100 miles away in the Shetland Islands, rescue boat HSL 2507 is deployed. The Catalina stays circling over the stranded men, and they signal in Morse code. High-speed launch on the way, help coming. Then sometimes later it signals, U-boat killed. The men cheer. They might just make it out of this. Every wave is torture, and they're having trouble holding on. A wave lifts up their dinghy and throws the entire crew overboard. Hornell emerges from the water, disoriented. The dinghy's getting pushed by the wind, and his men lay scattered around him. He clings to the lifeboat, counting heads.
Everyone's here?
They struggle to turn it over in heavy waves, and one by one, they help each other climb aboard and rebuild their barely stable setup. Water starts to fill the dinghy, and without the bucket and their strength fading, the small dinghy floats lower and lower, partially submerging some of the men in the freezing sea. The situation is desperate. Hornell's vision starts to blur. The men huddle in search of any warmth. Laurent starts to go delirious.
Laurent? Stay awake, please. Laurent!
Hornell and his men try to talk with him to keep him focused. But it's no use. He's gone. The men are devastated. Hornell makes a difficult decision to push Laurent's body overboard. Up above, the Catalina's running out of fuel. There's no choice. The crew radios the men's position one last time and turns for home. The men stifle back tears as they watch their hope fly away. They float alone in the sea. But then they see something in the sky. It's a huge aircraft. The men perk up. They start waving their hands and they see a big bomber turn towards them. It drops something from its belly. The men watch. It's a wooden boat! But the wind is strong and the boat gets carried away, flying off until it disappears from sight behind a wave. They bob up and down in the waves and see it floating 500 yards away.
Let's swim. We can make it.
No! It's too far!
Despite being completely blind from the salt water and having no idea where the boat is, Hornell drags himself towards the water. The men swim after him, reaching out, grabbing his arms, trying to hold him back. Hornell pleads, but his men know it's no use, and they watch their lifeboat float away. A spotlight appears over the waves, illuminating the men. The rescue boat has finally arrived.
Contact. We found them.
After 21 long hours, the survivors of the Catalina are pulled from the sea. Laying on the dinghy, Hornell looks up, staring through his blurred eyes at the scene of his men being lifted out of the water. A sense of accomplishment washes over him, and with the last of his strength, he musters the smallest of smiles. His eyes close, never to open again. The sailors on the rescue boat attempt to revive him for 4 hours, but it's no use. Thanks to Hornell, 5 survivors would all make a full recovery and survive the war. David Ernest Hornell was posthumously awarded the Victoria Cross, and it was received by his wife. It's a dark, stormy night on Christmas 1943, and the mighty German battleship Scharnhorst, one of the fastest ships of the Kriegsmarine, carves through the rough Arctic seas. At its bridge stands the fleet commander, Konteradmiral Erich Bay. He's charging towards a soft target of British merchant ships on their way to the Soviet Union. But the bridge is suddenly illuminated as star shells fill the air. Bay searches the horizon through the driving snow, only to see the ominous sign of muzzle flashes from British guns. Bay is here to fight, but not heavily armed battleships, so he orders the ship to turn 150 degrees and flee, but at the same time to try and hit the British ships. As Scharnhorst turns away, its massive aft turret, Caesar, turns to face the British and fires a salvo. They have to escape the Royal Navy guns, but the British guns are accurate and deadly. A shell smashes straight into the German radar.
Wir haben das Radar verloren.
Weiter feuern. Volle Kraft auf die Maschinen und stellt eine Nebelwand her.
As the smokescreen from the Scharnhorst starts to emerge, another enemy shell slams into the ship with a powerful bang.
Schadensmeldung.
Oberflächlich.
Volle Kraft. Sie erwischen uns nicht.
Scharnhorst is speeding away. Without radar, the Germans are sailing blind, and Bay reluctantly orders to return to port, confident he can outrun the British chase.
Zurück in den Hafen.
Bay has no idea the cruisers are not acting alone. As the British ships follow Scharnhorst, they send out a transmission. To the south, hidden in the dark, waits a second part of the British trap, the main force led by the mighty HMS Duke of York. And in command is Admiral Sir Bruce Fraser, Commander-in-Chief of the Home Fleet, who's come personally to see the Scharnhorst destroyed. Fraser smiles to himself as he receives the transmission that tells him that the Scharnhorst is headed right towards their position. The trap is about to be sprung, and the enemy they've been looking for appears on radar.
Surface vessel, bearing 295, range 35...
Admiral Fraser orders HMS Duke of York to close in slowly. They stalk their prey, inching closer.
30,000.
Patience.
It's clear Scharnhorst has no idea that they're here. They plow through the rough Arctic seas, undetected, into engagement distance.
20,000.
Patience.
Fraser orders his men to hold steady.
11,000.
Take aim.
The Duke of York's gigantic turrets stir to life, armed with 10 immensely powerful 14-inch main guns.
Order Jamaica to fire star shells.
Conter-Admiral Bay and his men think the battle's done. They're steaming south on their way to the port, when suddenly, yet another star shell illuminates the sky directly in front of them. Everyone's attention turns to its source.
Fire!
The Duke of York opens fire with a full broadside. The men aboard Scharnhorst see the world around them erupt with the sounds of splashes and metal. A single 14-inch shell punches directly through Anton, the foremost turret, killing everyone inside. To prevent the magazines from exploding, the second forward turret, Bruno, is also flooded. Bay realizes that they're trapped. He can't turn back because of the chasing cruisers. So, his only option now is to escape to the east. Scharnhorst turns hard to port as they return fire with all they have, which for now is just one turret. The enemy fire comes crashing down all around them. Another 14-inch shell smashes into Scharnhorst's superstructure, triggering a massive fire. The Germans realize that Bruno isn't aflame, and they flooded it for no good reason. So the order is given to drain the magazine, and Bruno comes to life. Scharnhorst takes fire from the flank and behind, as Bruno is rocked by a 14-inch shell. The turret is full of smoke, and the crew have to evacuate. Scharnhorst proceeds at absolute maximum power as Caesar, their last turret, fires at the British ship. Back on the Duke of York, Fraser is getting nervous. Scharnhorst is steadily sailing away from the action. The Duke of York's guns are adjusting their aim. But an incoming salvo from the Scharnhorst strikes the ship, bringing the catastrophic news.
Sir, we've lost the radar.
Without that radar, there's no way they can adjust their aim.
Make repairs, and fast.
Lieutenant Harold Bates from the radar shack is already on it. He can see that the radar is drooping downwards. Without waiting for orders or informing anyone, he climbs onto the mast. It's in the middle of a snowstorm. It's an incredibly brave act. The wind and snow bite at his face, and he's repeatedly buffeted by the blast from the main guns. But Bates pushes through, willing himself upwards step by step. They continue to fire into the night, yet with the German ship racing away, the chances of landing a hit shrink by the second. To Bay's delight, Scharnhorst is on the verge of slipping out of the trap. The British ships now sail full east, trying desperately to keep up. At the same time, the German technicians successfully bring the Bruno turret back online. It's immediately put to use, sending shells towards the enemy. On the Duke of York, Harold Bates clings onto the mast, like his life depends on it. The The wind howls around him, tearing his hat away. But he finds his footing and keeps going. With massive effort, he manages to push the radar antenna back into alignment. Suddenly, the radar screen comes back to life.
Contact, range 22,000 yards.
Radar reports Scharnhorst at 22,000 yards.
That's over 10 nautical miles. It's within the range, but it's still a difficult shot in these conditions.
Correct and fire, quickly!
The guns adjust up and fire. 14-inch shells fly up into the sky. They travel for 30 eternal seconds. Then they come down. A shell hits the Scharnhorst and passes through the thin upper-bow armor and finally explodes in boiler room number 1. Bay's horrified. He knows it's over.
Schadensmeldung.
Starker Dampfverlust. Wir sind auf 8 Knoten gefallen.
It's not enough. Already aware of his fate, Bay orders to make a transmission that reads,
Wir kämpfen bis zur letzten Patrone. Es lebe Deutschland.
The German engineers get to work and the ship recovers to 22 knots. But it's not enough. Her reduced speed makes her vulnerable to torpedo attacks. The British ships join the main force from the north. Scharnhorst is now surrounded.
Konzentration auf die Zerstörer. Lass sie nicht näher kommen.
The German 15-centimeter secondary turrets target one of 4 destroyers approaching. There's far too many of them. 2 make the charge and release 8 torpedoes towards Scharnhorst. A British torpedo finds its mark and rocks the German battleship. Then the 2 other destroyers make their run, releasing 12 torpedoes towards the Scharnhorst. 1 impacts on port and 3 more on starboard, all in quick succession. The ship shudders and groans. It begins taking in water and slows down to 10 knots.
Torpedos abfeuern.
Bay orders Scharnhorst to turn around and attempt a torpedo run of its own, but the ship is too wounded. Only 1 torpedo is launched, and it misses. Scharnhorst is surrounded by the British ships and is pummeled into submission. Its secondary turrets continue firing. Even with the ship burning and entirely boxed in, the men continue firing to the last. The Caesar turret fires again and manages to hit a destroyer. The British destroyers push forward again and perform another torpedo attack at point-blank range. 5 explode against Scharnhorst's hull. The Caesar turret, which was the first to fire in the battle, is damaged and finally falls silent. Huge amounts of water have poured into the many holes, and the ship begins to list. Still standing on the bridge, with his ship leaning heavily to starboard beneath him, Bay knows it's really over, and finally orders to abandon ship. Admiral Fraser watches the grand Kriegsmarine ship in its death throes as it rolls over. The bow of the ship sinks, raising the stern into the air. The propellers still turning slowly. Fraser would later tell his men,
Gentlemen, the battle against the Scharnhorst has ended in victory for us. I hope that any of you who are ever called upon to lead a ship into action against an opponent many times superior will command your ship as gallantly as the Scharnhorst was commanded today.
Of Scharnhorst's 1,968-man crew, only 36 were pulled alive from the water. Contra-Admiral Eric Bay was not among them. It's the early dawn on the 10th of December 1941. A task force of ships are off the coast of Malaya. They're hoping to launch a surprise attack against the Japanese, who they think are in Kuantan. The head of the task force is the HMS Prince of Wales and its captain, John Jack Leach.
Sir, Tenedos is signaling distress.
Bloody fools. We're under radio silence. This has better be good.
Leach speaks urgently with Admiral Phillips.
Sir, Tenedos is under a Japanese bomber attack.
It's the worst possible situation.
Get everyone ready.
With horror, they need to accept that the Japanese have found them and the entirety of Task Force Z is within range. Outside, the air trembles with the engines of Japanese aircraft. They come through the clouds and line up their target. First, they go for the aging battlecruiser, HMS Repulse. The bombs are away. They scream down towards the ship, and a tall column of water erupts on the starboard side, followed by several more on the port side. Captain Tennant of Repulse orders,
"All hands to action stations!"
A 250-kilogram bomb screams down. There's an enormous explosion as the bomb hits the Repulse amidships. The captain is thrown to the floor, as are the rest of the bridge. The bomb has penetrated through the port seaplane hangar and devastated the armoured deck below. It's a scene of carnage as the fallen lie around the hangar. Repulse emerges from the fray with a plume of smoke coming from her upper deck where she'd been struck.
Damage report. No critical damage.
Her speed, though, is unaffected and she steams on, emitting just the faintest smoke curl. On the Prince of Wales, Leach turns and gives an order.
Action stations! Repel aircraft!
More shapes emerge from the clouds. It's 67 Japanese bombers. Two squadrons separate and approach the capital ships in a pincer formation, designed to reduce the effectiveness of the British anti-aircraft gunfire. From 8 miles away, they begin their dive. Philip's demeanour hardens as he broadcasts the order,
"All ships increase speed to 25 knots. All captains are granted freedom to maneuver."
An officer hunches over his radio.
Firm message. Over.
His face drops.
Sir, the aircraft to port appeared to be carrying torpedoes.
There is no such aircraft around.
Phillips observes the sight through binoculars and watches aghast. The Japanese aircraft continue to lose height and fly into some low cloud before appearing off the Prince of Wales port bow. 9 Japanese planes start their approach. They see the British ship in the distance as they come in skimming the waves. There's a flash as one by one the British anti-aircraft guns open fire. Tracers arc up towards the black dots in the sky, and after 12 salvos, the guns switch from controlled fire at individual planes to barrage fire, hurling a curtain of bursting shells to provide a flak barrier for the hostile planes, desperately trying to force them to drop their torpedoes early. The Japanese planes keep coming. The loaders begin trembling as they push shells into the magazine feeds, hoping that something, anything, will down just one of the planes. The British anti-aircraft gunners, however, are unprepared for the sheer speed of the Japanese planes. Most of the British anti-aircraft shells burst well behind the aircraft as they bear down upon the British ships. Battered but still flying, the Japanese pilots bravely push on until their torpedoes are in range. They drop. The fish are away. On the Prince of Wales, there's horror as Captain Leach barks the order,
"Hard to port!"
attempting to slip through the tracks of the torpedoes. Meanwhile, the Japanese bombers are too large and too fast to pull away quickly, and they fly straight at the Prince of Wales, machine gunning as they go, reaching the battleship well before their torpedoes do, and causing disorder on her decks, killing and wounding sailors as they approach. The British gunners are now firing at near point-blank range. A Betty bomber takes a flak shell to the wing, which snaps it from the body, causing it to spin and dramatically slam into the water. But there's no time to celebrate. 2 torpedoes move straight towards the ship, and there's no avoiding a hit. All the men aboard brace for impact. first one strikes. A pillar of water erupts on the port side of the Prince of Wales and punches through the outer hull, but thankfully, there's only limited flooding. Moments later, the second torpedo strikes the Prince of Wales under her stern, blasting open a hole some 4 meters high and 6 meters wide. It's a critical blow. There's now a direct route for water into the very heart of the ship, sweeping sailors off their feet and drowning the ship's engine room. Her speed immediately starts dropping as water floods into her. Emergency pumps are unable to stop the steady rise. The sailors continue to attempt repairs, wading through water now waist deep to get to the hull. She begins listing to port. On the deck, the gunners keep shooting to the point where the air can almost burn the skin, but their rounds explode behind the Japanese planes and the men brace for another impact. All the sailors can do is watch, wait, hold on and hope. The tracks zip towards the ship and a torpedo strikes the Prince of Wales. Her electrical system at the stern suffers massive damage. Without power, both the steering motors are dead. The Prince of Wales is a sitting duck. She's now a death trap. Captain Leach orders,
"Flood the void spaces of the starboard torpedo defense system. We need the ship level."
He needs the ship level, or almost level, so that his men can train their anti-aircraft guns, which are currently pointing too high. But this also makes the ship more vulnerable should she receive another torpedo strike. The sailors strap on any small arms they can to the side of the ship in a last-ditch defense. By 12:19, the Prince of Wales is left with little anti-aircraft protection. The gunners pour water on their boiling barrels and the loaders scramble to and from the magazine, knowing this will be a gamble at best. A gunner looks up.
Contact, due east.
A huge formation of aircraft sweep down like a cloud, losing height and once again splitting into 2 attack formations. 6 Betty bombers come in low and race towards the Prince of Wales on her raised starboard side, flying under the anti-aircraft fire she could offer on that side. The sailors begin firing with anything they could raise from below, but it's to no avail. All the fire goes harmlessly above the attackers. Torpedoes drop in quick succession. The sailors watch in horror as 3 torpedo tracks come straight for them. There's a hit. A jagged hole tears right through the ship as the first torpedo blows clean out through the other side, the force of the current dragging sailors under and out of the ship. The second torpedo strikes almost directly under B turret, shooting a plume of oil and water up the side of the ship. The final torpedo strikes the unarmoured section of the hull, where there is only 1 inch thick steel. There's nothing Captain Leach can do. The steering gear of his ship is completely useless. Meanwhile, the repulsor's putting up a valiant defense against her attackers. Captain Tennant turns his great ship swiftly towards the diving aircraft, readying his vessel to pass through the tracks of the torpedoes that he knows are coming. The torpedoes drop, and as they run in the water, they leave a telltale trail of white bubbles. Captain Tennant brings all his seamanship to bear as he manages to dodge the tracks of every one of the torpedoes dropped by the 2 Japanese squadrons, as well as the others coming from the attack on the Prince of Wales going on at the same time. Each member of the bridge holds on as the ship leans and lists from Tennant's audacious steering. The crew speak later with pride of 19 torpedoes missing due to the maneuver, and how the huge ship had been thrown about like a destroyer. Incredibly, he also avoids all the bombs from high-level bombers dropped from 12,000 feet. But at 12:20 on the Prince of Wales, Phillips is left with no option. Reluctantly, he orders his radio signallers to break radio silence and transmit to the rest of the task force to come to the aid of the Prince of Wales and the repulse. At 12:23, the remaining 20 or so torpedo bombers almost simultaneously pounce on repulse from different directions. Her main guns keep firing against the incoming enemy. The 15-inch shells fly straight into the water, hoping to create a splash powerful enough to get enemy planes into the waves. But the Repulse crew is out of luck today. The first 8 aircraft drop their torpedoes on her starboard side. Captain Tennant turns Repulse to starboard to dodge the torpedoes again. But then the 3 aircraft attack Repulse on her port side. Captain Tennant can do no more than continue his turn to starboard to avoid the first 8 torpedoes. The deckhands and gunners keep up as much fire as they can, but they know it will make little difference. Men fall to the floor and cover their heads. A torpedo hits Repulse amidships on the port side, but does little significant damage. She continues maneuvering and steams at 25 knots. Tennant is not going to stop.
Set a new heading for...
He never finishes his sentence as a torpedo hits. Immediately, 9 aircraft attack Repulse from different angles. 6 planes attempt to work their way round to her starboard side, while the remaining 3 Betty bombers go straight in at her port side.
There's too many of them!
It's a skillfully executed attack. Repulse's engines are still fully functioning, but with her rudder jammed, she's simply steaming in a circle. The gunners don't know what to do.
Tell the bridge we can't get a good view of the planes. We need to change course.
Enemy incoming!
The 3 Betty bombers fly forward, seemingly unfazed by the ack-ack fire the British can muster, and they drop their torpedoes in a slow sequence, as if contemptible of the Navy's attempts to fend them off. And they continue their course, strafing the deck and scattering the sailors as they overfly.
Of this!
A Betty ignites and spins rapidly out of control and thumps into the water. Shortly after, a gunner leveling his weapon at the approaching bomber sends a shell straight through the cockpit. And the Japanese aircraft explodes in midair. It's a small constellation. 2 explosions tear through the lower decks, immediately causing catastrophic flooding and destroying the engines. Repulse lists to port and looks done for. But the Japanese are not finished yet. At 12:25, the other 6 torpedo bombers skim the waves towards Repulse's starboard side. The men on deck watch helplessly before scattering for cover. All 6 planes release their torpedoes at once. The wait is agonizing. 2 rudimentary shots ring from the guns as the planes fly overhead, but the torpedoes are still coming. There's silence. A rating puts his head over the rail. He's rocked by a pummeling explosion. Even though 5 missed, a final torpedo scored the single hit. Over the last 4 to 5 minutes, Repulse had been hit by 4, possibly 5 torpedoes. Very quickly, the list to port starts to increase, with men leaning and staggering their way through the ship. All 51 of the Japanese torpedo bombers had now completed their attacks, but only 8 of the 34 high-level bombers had done so. 2 squadrons of high-level bombers remain that had not yet attacked, and each plane carries a single, huge, 500-kilogram bomb. At 12:33 p.m., the first 9 of these bombers starts a high-altitude attack. But their bombs are released too early and fail to find their target, missing by a considerable distance. Repulse, with multiple large holes in her hull, now is quickly sinking. The other ships from Task Force Z have now come to their aid. Captain Tennant orders,
"All hands to the main deck. Life rafts cut loose. Abandon ship."
Not one man had left his place of duty until being ordered to do so. But now, dozens of men pour up through the hatches from below or scramble down ladders from stations high in the superstructure. The crew start jumping over the side into a spreading pool of oil. As the ship lists further, men begin climbing up the sloping deck and start to slide down the huge raised starboard side of the battle cruiser. Hundreds of men get away in minutes. However, below decks, many loudspeakers are not working, and the men don't hear the order to abandon ship. As she continues rolling over to port, the huge torpedo bulge and its jagged torpedo hull emerge out of the water, and the stern rears up to expose her still turning propellers. The stern then slips below the waves and disappears, leaving her bow hanging in the air, before it too vanishes beneath the waves. Just 11 minutes after the first torpedo had struck her, Captain Tennant fights his way to the surface, emerging by a nearby raft. There's another attack. The Japanese are still not done. A 500-kilogram bomb hits the Prince of Wales, adding to its inevitable defeat. By 12:50 p.m, the end is nigh for the Prince of Wales. She's taken on an estimated 18,000 tons of water. Captain Leach orders all the wounded to leave the ship.
This is the end.
No.
He leaves the bridge and comes down to the quarterdeck, where a large group of his crew had congregated.
Gentlemen, she's been badly riddled. We need men to try and maneuver back to Singapore. If you go, that's fine. His Majesty needs every sailor possible. But let's help our old girl out one last time, eh?
There's a slight hesitation. Surely the ship is sinking. They haven't got a hope of navigating to a friendly port. A silence follows before two men let go of the rail and salute. A petty officer and several other ratings also step forward, salute, and fall in behind Leach. Captain Leach smiles and declares an order to those present.
Aside from gunners, marines, and officers, those who wish to board the Express can do so. God save the King.
He then climbs back up to the bridge to join Admiral Phillips. Hundreds of men started crossing over to Express on makeshift lines and gangplanks. But as the Prince of Wales rolls further over onto her port side and her starboard side lifts, the gap between her and Express starts to widen. The gangplanks fall into the sea, but men continue to swing across on ropes and the cable that still joined the two ships. Under the incredible strain, the cable finally snaps. The Lister port starts to worsen. It was clear the ship was now beyond any help from aircraft, destroyers or tugs. Leach comes to the realization that his ship's not going anywhere and reluctantly gives the order.
Abandon ship.
The battleship's starboard bilge keel rises. The skipper of Express skillfully judges the last moment before he's forced to pull away, her hull bumping and grinding on the battleship's heaving keel and almost getting overturned herself. The destroyer suffers a 20-foot gash in her hull from the contact, but many men have been saved. Admiral Sir Tom Phillips remains on the bridge almost to the end, he and Captain Leach silent, contemplating their defeat. The last reports seeing them alive are at 13:24, when the two men are on the side of the horizontal ship, just before she rolls over and capsizes. The destroyer Electra sent a simple signal to headquarters in Singapore. HMS Prince of Wales, sunk. It's 25th of May 1982, and two pairs of Argentinian jets roar low over the Falkland Islands on their way to what could be a one-way mission. They're led by Captain Pablo Carballo, and he and his men are flying old and poorly equipped A4 Skyhawk jets loaded with bombs. Their mission is to destroy the British ships HMS Coventry and HMS Broadsword. The Argentinians have captured the Falkland Islands, or the Malvinas as they call them, and they need to destroy the ships if they're to hold on to them. The Argentinians know that two ships have moved closer to the islands to cover ground troops, islands that give them the chance to approach undetected by British radar.
Entrando a su rango. No escalen por ninguna razón.
The Skyhawks fly as low as they dare, hugging the contours of the island as they reach the enemy's radar range. The two ships are equipped with advanced anti-air missiles and powerful radars which have been devastating to the Argentinian planes. The only way to evade detection is to stay low. On board HMS Coventry, Captain David Hart Dyke has his men on high alert. British Special Forces have warned him that the Argentinians have recently launched on a mission, but he's unaware that this time, his ship is the target. 4 detections on the radar screen confirms his worst fears.
Full contacts bearing 225 range 30.
Captain Hart Dyke immediately orders the crew to action stations and alarms blare on both ships, and swiftly the mighty Sea Dart's surface-to-air missiles turn to bear. The Skyhawks, at the same time, approach Pebble Island and hug its contours. With expert flying, the Argentinians become invisible to the British radar, and on the Coventry, the contacts disappear.
Contacts lost over Pebble Island.
It's precisely what Captain Hart Dyke feared. Pebble Island is too close. The Sea Darts have a minimum range, so now they'll only be able to fire once, if they're lucky. Hart Dyke gets on the radio to Broadsword.
Broadsword, what is your status?
HMS Broadsword is equipped with shorter range Seawolf missiles, better suited for a close range fight. On the Skyhawks, Carballo brings his men as close to the ships as he can under cover of the land. His planes have no radar and no warning systems, but at 10 nautical miles distance, they can see the British ships.
Comenzando el ataque. Buena suerte, capitán.
He and his wingman, Lieutenant Carlos Rinque, make the charge and accelerate to maximum speed while skimming the waves. Aboard Coventry, the two Skyhawks immediately light up their radar.
2 hostiles bearing 192 low level.
To add to the confusion, a British Harrier jump jet reports in. It's in the firing zone.
Captain, friendly aircraft 20 miles out.
A British plane and enemies in the same airspace. Should he fire? In a split-second decision, he chooses the missiles.
Turn the Harrier away. Shoot missiles.
But the operators still can't get a lock. The Argentinians are flying extremely low, mere feet from the sea. Carballo's canopy is covered in sea salt as he soars through the spray, so low that the radars struggle to track them. Aboard the Coventry, the men's hearts race as they see the enemy getting ever closer. The Sea Dart missiles are failing to lock. Captain Hart Dyke feels the dread of a wrong decision, praying for Broadsword's Seawolf missiles to do the job. Aboard Broadsword, the men can see the targets. The Skyhawks are flying so close, the Seawolf's radar detects them as a single aircraft. They lock the target as the Argentinians barrel down towards them. But then, the single contact splits into two, and the two sets of coordinates crash the missile guidance system.
The missiles are not responding. Restart them.
There's no time. Lookouts aboard Coventry see the Skyhawks with the naked eye and shout with alarm. In a last-ditch effort, HMS Coventry's deck guns turn to bear and open fire, soon joined by the roar of personal machine guns and rifles, sailors firing from all across the deck. Carballo sees the splashes of the shells striking the sea and the tracers of the British bullets drawn closer, refining their aim. The enemy ship is right there. He can taste victory. But the shells are getting closer. He can feel it. They're not going to make it.
Cambiar otro!
He orders to swap targets, setting his sights on Broadsword. The two planes pull to the side and away from Coventry's guns, roaring by her deck as they line up their pass. The two Skyhawks pull the triggers and their 1,000-pound bombs are released. They fall down into the sea and splash onto the ocean surface. It redirects them upwards as they bounce, skipping like stones. Broadsword sailors see the two massive bombs bounce twice as they head down towards them. One bomb hits the sea and sinks short of the Broadsword, but the other doesn't. It punches straight into the side of Broadsword. It's deflected upwards and it bursts out of the deck. It flies on, tumbling as it falls into the sea, without exploding. Carballo is dismayed, but they're not done yet. Coming in behind them is the second flight of First Lieutenant Mariano Angel Velasco and Ensign Jorge Nelson Barranuevo. They are equipped with less powerful but more reliable 250-kilogram bombs. Aboard the British ship, they now see all 4 contacts on the radar, and Captain Hartdyke orders an immediate turn to starboard to allow the missiles to fire at all contacts. Coventry's missile operators get a lock on Velasco, and the Sea Darts turn directly towards them.
Shoot!
There's a bright flash on Coventry's deck, and the missile rockets out in a plume of smoke. Just as it does, Velasco and his wingman fly lower and lower over the water. They disappear from the British radar, and the missile goes straight. The sailors are aghast as the missile loses track and flies away. Velasco sees the missile fly off 500 meters to his right, but his eyes are locked on HMS Coventry. As he fast approaches, Broadsword, meanwhile, is restarting the missile systems as the Skyhawks fly in towards them. Sailors nervously stare at blank screens as they're on a race between the Skyhawk and the rebooting computers.
Come on!
The screens come to life and the sailors get to work. The Skyhawks are detected and appear on the Seawolf radar. The launches turn and the target is locked. But then, on their screens, they see HMS Coventry sail directly in front of the launcher.
The Coventry is in the way!
In their rush to cover all targets, they've blocked the only missiles that could actually fire. The Broadsword's captain tries to maneuver to get a clear shot, but it's just too late. In the Skyhawks, Velasco and Barranuevo are approaching their target. On the Coventry, Captain Hartdyke orders all turrets fire at will. Cannons and machine guns join in, firing with everything they've got at the incoming planes. The main 4.5-inch gun is sending its shells towards the sea. The men realize the sights are misaligned, but that's not the only malfunction. At the same time, the 20mm anti-air gun jams. The men desperately try to fix it as the Argentinian planes close. In a desperate attempt, sailors all across the ship open fire with their rifles. The sea churns and splashes as everything the British have is directed towards the advancing Skyhawks. But it's all too late. Echo over the intercom, and commanding officers order everyone to hit the deck. Men jump for cover and hold on, waiting for the inevitable. Velasco sees the enemy ship fill his view and pulls the trigger. His A4's 20mm cannons are unleashed, spraying a volley of lead across the ship's deck and superstructure. He holds the trigger down as long as he can. Then he releases his payload. The bombs fall away, arcing lazily across the air before slamming into HMS Coventry with force. They punch through the hull, the impact echoing through the ship as 2 almost hollow thunks. But there's no explosion. The second A4 roars overhead without dropping its bombs, the payload failing to release. Seconds drag on. The men start to get back up, looking around with fear and confusion. A voice comes through the intercom reporting damage, but they never get to finish their sentence. The bombs detonate. 2 huge explosions rock HMS Coventry. In the air, the Argentinian pilots are elated to see smoke pouring from the Coventry. They've done it. One explosion right under the bridge breaks a massive hole in the side of the ship and destroys the computer room. The fire moves up through corridors and blasts through the operations room, where all the operators and Captain Hartdyke were working. The second one explodes in the forward engine room, starting a massive fire and taking out electrical and propulsion power from the ship. Captain Hartdyke comes back to his senses. He's surrounded by smoke and destruction. Screams fill the air. He tries to see who's making them, but they appear to come from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. He staggers to his feet and realizes the ship is listing. He attempts to use his intercom, but is completely dead. It's no use. He needs to get out. Captain Hartdyke slowly works his way through the smoke and corridors as he listens to the ship groaning and cracking underneath him. He manages, somehow, to find an exit and emerges into the cool air of the South Atlantic. Now on deck, he's filled with concern for his men, but instead of chaos, he's met by an extremely professional evacuation. His team of sailors practiced this and are now springing into action. Men rescue their fellow sailors from the smoke-filled cabins and provide medical attention on deck, as others prepare the survival rafts and help more sailors put on their survival gear. Hardyke feels the deck shift beneath his feet as the hull lists. He's dazed and wounded, and amidst the chaos, he has to sit down on the rapidly listing hull, while others abandon the ship. All but Captain Hardyke. After all the men have gone, Hardyke is alone on the upturned hull of the Coventry. He casts one last look around the smoking ship. He's done his duty. And finally, as the last man aboard, he enters the last survival raft and drifts away from his command. Due to the professionalism of the British, 170 survivors would be picked up from the water by HMS Broadsword and the British rescue helicopters, but tragically, 19 lost their lives in the battle. All of the Argentinian pilots make it back to base and land successfully. They'd done it, but their victory did not turn the tide of the war. Thanks for staying until the end. If you wish to see more exciting stories, don't miss our previous compilation, 7 Incredible Modern Battles.